Welcome to another episode of Not Without Right, a Shakespeare in the Public Domain podcast. Today, I am joined by two incredible directors and physical theater practitioners that I'm so excited to have on the pod because they also happen to be my book club. And as a book club, we meet every week and have been since the earliest days of the pandemic shelter in place back in March of 2020. So, Graham Smith and Roberta Inscho, welcome to the show.
Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Why don't I let you each introduce yourselves a little bit, whatever you want the people to know about you. I'll start with you, Roberta.
Oh, start with me. Okay. I was hoping Graham would go first. My name is Roberta Inscho. I'm a director choreographer. I live in Modesto, California. I don't know, what else do I big fan of Dawn, my bestie, love of my life. And I don't know, I'm just so excited. I think the thing right now that I'm really excited about is being a theater patron, being a theater supporter, being a theater observer and educator. And so that's something that I'm kind of like trying to figure out right now.
Great, thank you. Graham.
Hey, thanks so much for having us on, Dawn. This feels like just like kind of full circle awesome. I'm a theater maker. I direct theater. I do a lot of theater education. I teach theater, both, to adults who are continuing their education journey, but also at undergrad institutions. I taught MFA program at ACT for a long time before RIP MFA at ACT. And yeah, I'm so thrilled to be, in conversation with both of you. Shakespeare for a long time was like not my friend. And, over the past, maybe 6 years, I really turned that relationship around, and now we're buds. But I still feel like a beginner. So I hope today is mostly softball.
Well, I hope that you two are sort of a regular feature of this podcast, and that once a month or every 6 weeks, you all can come on the show. And this is because our book club has read so many Shakespeare themed, adjacent, in the world of books, that there's no way we'll get through any of them in this episode. Also, in the coming months, Graham is working on a production of The Tempest. Roberta, you have just finished a deep cut of Macbeth for a high school theater program. So we'll want to have you back on to talk more about how those things progress. So I hope you'll come back, and we don't have to cover it all today. So it definitely can be bowling with the bumpers up. Okay, Graham. I do want to jump all the way back to the beginning of book club. And book club started with just Graham and I initially, and our very first book was Graham.
Shakespeare in Divided America by James Shapiro.
Why did we pick that book?
I feel like we were feeling Shakespeare was a good way to think about a divided America that we were all experiencing kind of in the midst of the pandemic.
Yeah. I don't know exactly when we picked that book up, but I remember distinctly being on the phone with you, Graham, while walking through my neighborhood in what had to be the first few days of shelter in place for us in the San Francisco Bay Area, which did go to a shelter in place sooner than other places in the country did. So I feel like we were reading that book by April if not March of 2020. And definitely inside of an administration that was handling the pandemic very differently than what we were watching other global nations do. So it felt very apropos to pick up James Shapiro's Shakespeare in a Divided America. Um, and of course, some of us have read everything James Shapiro has ever written. So there's that too. Now, Roberta, you were reading that book independent of us. You picked that up on your
Yeah.
own.
No, I got it as a gift. I did read it on my own, and I got it as a gift from one of the parents of the students who was in the virtual Troilus and Cressida Instagram episodic thing that I produced during the pandemic. So I totally I didn't even actually know this book was existing until I got it in the mail as a gift, and I was like, oh, so yeah, that's how I got it.
Roberta, do you remember anything from that book that was particularly striking for you that you still carry with you?
Um, hmm, oh, nothing is coming to mind right now. Um, I think the thing that I think at that point when I was reading it, it felt, um, I think I felt a lot of feelings, and then maybe that was just because of the time that we were in. But I feel like when I read the book, I was like already very like sensitive, like emotionally sensitive. And so I think um I have it marked up, and I remember like just being like, ugh, sad, angry. Like I just remember putting like in the margins emotions and feelings. So I don't know if that book was some sort of therapy for me at the time. I also remember reading that book and feeling like I don't actually still know what the answer is. Like I don't actually know how theater in general can unite, and or can it unite, or is it really more of a tool of division? Like I feel like that was a question that I was still wrestling with, um and I think because I had just worked with a lot of young people, I was feeling actually quite hopeful because they were such a group of brilliant minds. And so I was so excited. I was like, yes, Shakespeare, look at us uniting people. Someone's from Texas, someone's people are from New York, I'm in California, someone else is elsewhere. And I was like, we're using this as a tool to bring us together. But I feel like the book made me, because I read it afterwards, I feel like the book actually made me feel anti unified.
Ah, interesting. Interesting. Graham, is there anything that still sticks with you from that book?
Yeah, for sure. A bunch of strange things. I mean, for folks who haven't read the book, it kind of talks about like why certain Shakespeare plays were really like predominant and
Mm.
popular during certain moments of American history. So if you like American history and you like Shakespeare, it's kind of like your perfect confluence. And so I remember that, Othello happened to be really popular, right after the Civil War in this country. And I remember the fun fact that like during during the time where Grant, who then later became president, was like a little baby soldier in Texas somewhere for the Union Army. Um, or maybe this was even before the Civil War started because he was quite young. He played Desdemona in a U.S. Army kind of production of Othello, which is just, when you think about Grant and that big furry beard that you see him with on the bills, you can't imagine him playing Desdemona, but apparently he was a very good Desdemona. Um, and the other thing that really sticks with me is this idea that really kind of really spun my brain around because I love comedy and I've done a lot of comedy in my life. And this idea that comedy is, which is the idea that the book starts with, that comedy is predominantly useful for maintaining the status quo, where tragedy is really about is radical because it really demolishes the status quo and makes way for something new, which didn't make sense to me because I'd always thought, like comedy is this thing where we can kind of thumb our nose at authority and kind of make fun of the powers that exist, in government, in social movements, that you can kind of take down and punch up. But actually, the idea of comedy, in a Shakespeare play is that, the society is destabilized and the characters all, have comic hijinks and run around and there's confusions and mix-ups and then it ends with a wedding, which means that there's a restoration of the status quo with maybe small difference, but essentially a restoration of the status quo, often with people who have to get exiled in order to make that status quo work. So you think about Twelfth Night, and you think about Malvolio getting exiled. You think about who's the gay sailor in Twelfth Night?
Antonio.
Antonio. Um, Antonio's kind of out of luck. And then you think about tragedy and you think, okay, so the civilization, whatever civilization that starts being destabilized by the end of the tragedy is just leveled. It just doesn't exist anymore. And so you kind of start anew with whatever the new idea is. And that really surprised me because I hadn't considered how maybe ineffective comedy is at revising the world.
Oh, that's fascinating. The
Hmm.
things that stick with me so much from that book was one, the seed that Shapiro planted in me to want to know more about Charlotte Cushman, and how from there we went on to read Lady Romeo, which might be one of my favorite book club Shakespeare adjacent books. But also, as we sort of cycle around to a second 45, now 47 administration, and Shapiro's discussion of that Julius Caesar in the park at the Delacorte, at the Shakespeare in the park, and how I remember also, like in 2017, I was at OSF. Roberta and I both were at OSF, and OSF was doing Julius Caesar that season too, and so that conversation around um, uh, the production that Oscar did that was so like on the nose versus some other productions throughout the country that maybe were a little more subvert, and it just has me now as we are early days of a second Trump administration. What does that mean for our Julius Caesar productions that we are going to see in the next 4 years, or our Hamlets, or our Othellos, or
Hmm.
will theater even make it? So those are the things that really stuck out for me with that book. Now, Roberta, I'm going to come back to you because I would love for you to tell us in further detail about this Troilus and Cressida that you did, the sort of genesis of it, and how you moved through that process.
Yeah. So this project came about, it was All the Web, the stage. And it featured students that I had met and worked with while at Belvoir Terrace Theater and Dance Summer Camp. Um, and those students had graduated the program. I had 2 years with them where we got to really dig deep into some Shakespeare each summer. And, I was looking for something to do, as we all were. And I think, I honestly don't remember, like one of those things where I pitched it, like, wouldn't it be great if we could hang out after camp and do some more Shakespeare? And the idea itself evolved. I didn't even come up with the name of the company, the organization. It really evolved with us meeting and talking on Zoom after everyone went back to their respective homes. And I knew that I wanted to work on Troilus and Cressida. The first time I had worked on that play was with you, Dawn, at where were we? Up
Marin
north.
Shakespeare.
Marin Shakes, yes. And so it's like, oh, I think this could be really an exciting play to tackle with this group. And we started just meeting on Zoom in our little boxes and popping off ideas. And at the time, Instagram had a feature called IGTV where you could upload longer videos. So came up with this concept of releasing episodic episodes that would be no longer than 10 to 12 minutes long. And we would have chunks and then tell this, perform this play through our little Zoom boxes. And we got so creative. The students composed music, they created graphics. We came up with the name. We figured out all the like behind the scenes content. So it was really kind of a full production experience, but through our screens. And I think the best part was it was a way to dive into Shakespeare with low stakes. They didn't have to memorize. We met maybe an hour or two a week, and then we would record, and whatever came up of it, we would. The beauty of being online and recording is that we could stop, like in film, and do some notes and then do it again. And then I would be in charge of doing all the post editing and putting it up on IGTV. Um, and they helped with growing our audience. And so it came up as a way to continue to engage with that particular group of students for me, because I really had bonded with them and we shared a love of Shakespeare, and I was needing something to do. They were needing something to do. And so it just worked. It was a really kind of magical alchemy of people and timing.
Does it still exist on the web?
It does. Yeah, even though the feature of IGTV doesn't exist, it's still all on Instagram. So yeah, it's there for your viewing
Okay.
pleasure at with media, at with ATWAS media.
We'll make sure that I drop the link in the
Yeah,
show
it's still
notes
there.
so people can check it out. And maybe I'll even convince you to let me host the episodes on this YouTube channel, on the
Oh,
Shakespeare in the Public Domain YouTube channel.
that'd be so fun. That'd be so
Uh,
fun.
Go ahead.
I said that would be so fun.
Oh, okay. And Graham, you also did a Shakespeare or two during the pandemic. I recall that you did an audio play that was some sort of adaptation. And then with some MFA students, as we got to a place where we could start to be back in person a little bit, you all made a movie of As You Like It. You want to tell me about those pandemic Shakespeare's?
The panorama experience of Shakespeare. Yeah, yeah. So I had been scheduled. I had, as I said, I worked a lot with the ACT MFA program, and they had hired me to direct a production of a beautiful play called Rough Magic by Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa. And it is kind of fan fiction, Shakespeare adjacent, where the protagonist is a dramaturg, and she is I guess Caliban kind of escapes, and Prospero is kind of an evil genius, and Caliban needs this dramaturg's help, and so it's kind of almost like a superhero kind of metaverse of all of Shakespeare's plays converging on this dramaturg who kind of needs to escape the bad guys and needs to help the good guys. It was going to be a really thrilling kind of experience. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Qui Gwen's work in that kind of like superhero genre. And and then, of course, the pandemic happened, and I really needed that paycheck. And so I convinced ACT to pivot hard to doing an audio play that we could record all the audio of over Zoom. We'd rehearse on Zoom, we'd record on Zoom, we'd then layer in effects and edits. And then we presented it, as an audio play that everyone could kind of listen to by their computer. And that was really fun to kind of explore, like, it's how I listen to a lot of Shakespeare plays. When I'm thinking about them, I love to like get the Archangel audio recording of a Shakespeare play. And so it was a way to kind of lean into a genre that I'd never really explored, but was always kind of curious about. And so that was a lot of fun. And then, we thought pandemic would kind of be done with us, but it wasn't. And so fully like a year later, I was scheduled to direct As You Like It, which was going to be the Will on Wheels tour that ACT did every year with its MFA students, where they would visit a bunch of high schools. And this would be a lot of high schoolers' kind of first experience with Shakespeare. And so, and in addition to just doing As You Like It, which has, I think, maybe 4 or 5 songs that are like in the text itself, we Ken Savage, the amazing producer Ken Savage, was like, "Oh, I think it would be great to pair you with Ryan Nicole Austin, who's a singer-songwriter and all around genius, basically the mayor of Oakland." And so Ryan and I started getting to work, kind of adapting As You Like It to be a musical with Ryan's original songs in there, sometimes borrowing a little Shakespeare-ish language and other times just being very, very contemporary. And of course, what we discovered was that, like, oh, the schools aren't ready to have live performances come visit them yet because of pandemic. We're not quite sure that's a good idea. Um, and so at this point, the ACT MFA had like not met in person for like a year or maybe more. And um, I think Dan Yan, who was the head of the school at that time, came to me and was like, "Graham, what do you think about, you know, we'll just do it at like the Bruns Amphitheater, the old Cal Shakes Amphitheater, rest in peace, Cal Shakes, and then we'll just like record it, with a static cam at the back of the amphitheater, and we'll just send that out to high schools." And I thought, oh, I don't know. I don't know if a static shot of a Shakespeare play with no sets or costumes, because that was the memo, from the back of an amphitheater is really gonna like catch people's hearts up with the world of Shakespeare. I think that might be the last time any of those students ever want to see Shakespeare. So I said, well, hey, we all have iPhones, right? We all got movie studios in our pockets now. So why don't I just figure out like which actor isn't in each scene, and then have that actor like be the camera operator, and we can actually build in camera moves because we'll block the camera actor. We'll block the camera actor along with the blocking for the scene so that we can have really dynamic, camera work in the scenes. And that way it will be more watchable. And ACT liked that idea. In fact, they liked it so much. I don't really understand how this happened, but they decided to like basically fund a feature film. And so a board member gave us the use of their vineyard property up in Sonoma. Um, and so we had basically we basically had like every environment you could want. We had like fields of grapes, we had like little forest glens, we had everything that we would possibly need. And, COVID restrictions in the unions were still pretty intense at that point. And so we had this incredibly strange restriction, which we just embraced, which was that we could rehearse forever as long as we rehearsed outdoors in mask, no problem. But then the actual filming, when the actors were allowed to take their masks off, could only occur in a 48-hour window. So our mission was to make a feature film musical, um, in 48 hours. We had to shoot it in 48 hours. And so we just kind of leaned into that and we were like, basically, let's never cut. Like, each scene is going to be a long playing scene. We'll cover it with two cameras. So in the edit, we can cut back and forth between like the wide shot and the close shot. But we're never going to call cut during the length of a scene. So we'll just keep rolling. And the actors were ready for that because that's what you do in theater anyway, right? It kind of maintains some of the liveness of it. And so we just banged that thing out in 48 hours. It kind of reminded me of like that Danish like filmmaking rule book called Dogma, where you're like, oh, I can't use, too much studio lighting. I can't use this and that. And so it was nice because we just kind of leaned into what the limitations were. And we made this beautiful movie musical about As You Like It during pandemic. And, I still watch it sometimes and I'm like, it's a beautiful record of like artists making work under weird circumstances and just shining because it was the first time they had got to play together in real life in a year and a half. And so that joy was documented in that film.
The pandemic made filmmakers of us all.
Yes.
Graham, I think I know the answer, but are either of those projects still available for general consumption?
I don't think they're publicly available,
Yeah.
but I think they exist somewhere on a hard drive. That's all I'll say.
There's an archive somewhere.
Somewhere got that.
But I will not be hosting those on this channel. Great. I, of course, have many questions. What I want to do is sort of go back even further in time and learn from each of you either a first or early encounter with Shakespeare to just get a sense of what the early vibes were like and what even put you on a Shakespeare path. Because I heard Roberta say you were working with these young people and you wanted to share your love of Shakespeare. And then when Graham says, if we show young people a long static shot of a Shakespeare with no production value, this will ruin Shakespeare for them. So I wonder how you got bit by the bug. I'll come to you first, Roberta.
I think, my most vivid kind of, it's not, I wouldn't say first experience with Shakespeare, because I think my first experience is in the classroom, in a literature class, reading the plays and, talking about them. But I would say the thing that is the lasting impression for me is when I was cast as Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet at Cal State. It was my last production directed by the great Melissa Hillman. And I think what really stood out for me is Melissa allowed so much play. There was no expectation to know everything. We really got to discover. And it was a contemporary setting. And so I remember when we were in rehearsal and we had to do the little, rap thing that Mercutio does. And Melissa was like, what do you got? Let's play. And so I'm in the room, with friends and just like coming up with stuff. And I felt like I had a lot of agency as an actor. And it was the first time that kind of example was set for me, especially with something rigorous like Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. And being able to play a part that I felt like wasn't my type, because I had just gone through school. I just got my BA in musical theater and I was drilled type. This is what your type is. This is what you should play. You're the funny girl. You're the best friend. You're the this, you're the that. And Melissa cast me as Mercutio. Like never in a million years did I think I would get cast in that role. So I think that was the most lasting impression for me. And then obviously the things that she taught me as an educator, I have absorbed, and also through you, on how to make Shakespeare exciting for young people.
I definitely have gotten to work with Melissa on a small handful of Shakespeare plays. Um, and it definitely is like so illuminating. It's such a good time. At Cal State, I played Jaques in a production of As You Like It that she directed. And then when Impact Theater, RIP Impact Theater, was also fully functional, and she would do some kick-ass Shakespeare every year. I got to
Yeah.
dramaturg Othello with her. I was her assistant director on A Measure for Measure. Just so illuminating. I always just loved her production approaches. So shout out Dr. Melissa Hillman.
We love you. And I got to
Love you.
die. Like that was so cool. Like I had a blood pack and I got to die. And like every undergrad is like, yeah, like it's like, I don't know, it just felt fun. And it's so rare to have a fun Shakespeare experience. So
When
yeah.
you're a young person, totally.
Yeah.
Graham, what about you? What was your first or an early or lasting?
Um, the two that come immediately to mind is I'm sure that Romeo and Juliet was like the first text that we had to deal with in school. And the thing that I remember most is some teacher was like, let's let them watch the Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet. And I just remember thinking that that Romeo actor had a very nice ass. So that was my first kind of Shakespeare memory. And I was very excited that they were showing that in public high school. I thought, yay. Um, and then I had, I feel very lucky that I've had like a few teachers in my life that I really think saved my life. And one of them is Julie Learberger, Mrs. Julie Learberger, who was my English teacher in high school, junior, senior year, maybe even sophomore year, because I just kept taking her. I just wanted to be in her classroom. And she was a very strict teacher, but I loved it. I loved it. And we were doing Macbeth, and she somehow knew because I did a lot of drama club stuff in high school, and so she knew that the way to get me hooked would be to be like, let's act out a scene, which wasn't like the usual MO for English class. um, and so she had me read the drunken porter scene from Macbeth, and I just hammed it up and you know scooped up a lot of laughs, and then I was kind of interested in the play. And it took me a long time after that to kind of come back around to Shakespeare. I really felt for a long time that the language was too challenging for me. I really was much more interested in like broad comedy and broad theater making. And I just thought it was too like my brain did not comprehend those words at the speed at which they're often delivered from stage. And so I felt left out. And it wasn't until I really started to, my husband, Will Dow, the amazing Will Dow, was up at OSF for several seasons at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And so through that exposure to some of the best Shakespeare on stage in the country, I really started to change my mind about Shakespeare, um, and started to go on a journey to try and learn more.
That's great. That's so great. I talk about my Shakespeare beginning ad nauseum, and I don't want every episode to be me recounting how Romeo and Juliet is now my favorite play, though when I first was introduced to it, I hated it. So I won't. What I will do is bring us back to some of our book club selections. So I've already shared that Lady Romeo is among one of my favorite sort of Shakespeare adjacent books that we've read. It focuses on the life of Charlotte Cushman, who's one of the early women actors who got to play so many of the great male roles, and she indeed became famous for playing Romeo. Early in her career, she was playing that Romeo opposite her sister as Juliet. I really became obsessed with that book and was even writing like treatments for how it could be like a limited Netflix series. I think I was kind of late. I think somebody already got the
It's
rights to that.
scoop.
to that IP. So, oops. I would love to hear from each of you what your, at least in this moment, because maybe tomorrow it'll be different because we've read so many books, what your favorite Shakespeare adjacent, Shakespeare themed book that we've read is. And also, if you have anything you want to add about Lady Romeo, please feel free to do so. Roberta.
I'm like, of course, feeling like I'm like, oh, nothing's coming to mind, but I guess maybe I'll do a little cheat. Well, we read Shakespeare's Sisters, which I really loved. I love kind of reading about the like women adjacent to Shakespeare's time.
Yeah, say more for the viewer listener so that they know what Shakespeare's Sisters is.
Yes, I think it has a longer title, and now I also am blanking on her name. But it will come to me. But it follows women who were writers during, the time of Shakespeare. So they weren't, writing. Their works had to be excavated because they were women during a time when they were not allowed to work, and they're in positions where they're writing journals. They're writing under pen names. I think then I'm trying to think of the author's name right now. Graham, do you remember?
I'll look it up while you talk.
Please. But what I loved about that is we were learning about how these women were defying the odds. I'm remembering one who it was all her journals that family members found, and it wasn't that they were meant to be published, but that the education, the remarkability in her writing, the storytelling. She was writing to her brother a lot, if I remember correctly. And just the prose in that, and how finding ways to that it was appreciated when women weren't being appreciated in that medium. And so I think that is what was cool, because I learned about people that, I didn't even know about. Fran, did you pull that?
Yeah. So the author's name is Rami Targoff,
I knew it was an R name.
and the
Yes.
subtitle is How Women Wrote the Renaissance.
Yes,
And
that's
and
right.
the three women are Mary Sidney, Amelia Lanier, and Elizabeth Carey.
I think Sydney was the one with the journals. And I think that was the woman who stood out to me the most. But yeah, so that's kind of Shakespeare adjacent, and I'll cheat a little bit because it's fresh on my mind. But I just read this book, Juliet, the lives and
Yes.
afterlives of Shakespeare's first tragic heroine, I think is the subtitle. And I think Graham, you would love it too. But that one is it's just fresh on my mind right now, and it basically chronicles how we've used the trope of Juliet throughout the years for propaganda, for social, like how we describe things in the media. It was just really powerful, and also one of those books that made me angry, and literally writing in the margins, ugh, men, like.
I'm having the remarkable cultural critic Jordan Williams, also known as my daughter, on the show in a couple of weeks.
So she'll talk about that.
And we are gonna focus a lot on that particular book. If she grants permission, maybe we'll invite you to join Roberta, though she believes that she can sustain an episode all on her own. So
she
we will
absolutely
see.
Can.
I believe.
Shockingly, and maybe Graham will talk about this more, I don't know what's on his mind, but the Judi Dench book, I think, is probably one of our more recent ones, but that actually wasn't a big hit for me. Um, it's a memoir essentially, and Judy shares her many experiences working on Shakespeare from her first Juliet casting, um, all the way into her, more later projects. And I think what was great about the book is she was very vulnerable and very honest about, as she got older, the things that she had to do to overcome her loss of vision. I thought it was really beautiful that the book had these doodles in the margins because she would doodle in her script. But I got a little bored. I got bored of this. I got bored of it after a while. It just kind of got a little bit repetitive. And um, although her experiences were really cool to read about, I didn't find that she was really like deeply invested in like investigating theater or Shakespeare or the industry as a whole, which is totally fine because it's her memoir. But it just kind of felt a little like um, surface level, I guess.
I love though that the subtitle was like "The Man Who Pays the Bills,"
Yes.
um, because low key he is also the man that pays my bills. So that was a vibe. I will put a list together in the show notes for viewers, listeners of our full reading list of everything we've read, and then also one that is very like targeted to the Shakespeare things we've read, because we've read a wide selection um, of things. Like our second book was The Warmth of Other Suns. So we
Yeah.
haven't just been focused on Shakespeare. So I'll drop that down there for folks. And we would love to hear from you too. If you have recommendations, if you want to at Roberta because you love the Judi Dench book, if you've
Come
if you
for
want to
me. Come
if
for
you
me.
want to comment, please by all means drop some notes for us in the comments so that we can be in dialogue with you. Graham, what has been your favorite?
I'm gonna quickly chase Roberta's and underline and lift up Roberta's like less than favorable review of the Judi Dench book, but I'm gonna take a totally different tactic, which is um, I'm an audiobook lover. A lot of these books I listen to as audiobooks, and um, and the Judi Dench book is so weird because because it was written by having because it's co-authored by Judy and one of her
Oh,
longtime
never heard of him.
collaborators, and I can't remember that person's name off the top of my head, but had worked with her as a director and a scene partner in a lot of shows over the years. And so he sat down with her and conducted a series of interviews to create and generate the text of this memoir. And I can, it's a very conversational tone in the book, so it must have been just like a wonderful conversation to listen to. But instead of giving us, the dear listeners, these wonderful, interview conversations on which the book is literally a, a transcription of, instead of
Mhm.
sharing those Judi Dench interviews with us, they hired another voice actor who sounds a little bit like Judi Dench to then read the transcript and to make it seem like it was conversational and not reading a transcript. And it was just the strangest experience in the world to have this like
Mhm.
Judi Dench impersonator reading Judi Dench's words and making it sound conversational. So that it was a miss for me on a bunch of levels. But there are some like amazing anecdotes in that book that I think a lot of people will enjoy. So if you're looking for amazing kind of backstage anecdotes, the book is chock full of them. Just don't listen to the audiobook. But the book that's on my mind and just feels like a kind of weird full circle for us and for the country, kind of where we are at this moment, is another James Lapine book. Sorry, James
Fear.
Lapine. Well, we're
Shapiro.
reading a Sondheim book right now. Excuse me, dear listeners and watchers. No, James Shapiro has a book called The Playbook, and it's about the creation of the Works Progress Administration and as part of FDR's New Deal, and all the plays and art that was created during the Great Depression in order to not just give kind of unemployment checks to artists, but to actually commission them to create work. And some of the most kind of like profound moments in what was possible with government-funded theater in America happened during this time. And it's estimated that like the program brought live theater to maybe a quarter of the entire population of the country that had never seen theater before in their communities. And in many ways, it's like the foundation of what later became the regional theater movement. This idea that the best theater in the country wasn't necessarily happening in New York, but could be happening everywhere, and theater should be happening everywhere. Um, and so it's a beautiful book about kind of like the creation of that program, and probably my favorite chapter is the chapter about the Macbeth that happened in Harlem, which is sometimes known as like Voodoo Macbeth, and Orson Welles was involved with it. Um, in a really strange way over the years, he seemed to embellish his role in creating that production. But then the second half of the book, is really about how the right in the country, the right-wing politicians, used this opportunity to then create a playbook to dismantle government funding for the arts and to really make the American public very scared of funding the arts in that way. And it's still the playbook that's used today to argue against public funding for the arts. And so it's kind of a very prescient book. I feel like we're days away from learning that the NEA has been completely, dismantled and destroyed forever here on the 28th of January, 2025. And so, I really appreciated that book, both for the like profound history that it shared in terms of what was made with that funding, but also the history of how politicians have learned only for personal gain, not because they actually believe in any of this, that defunding the arts could bring them kind of fame and fortune in their
Fame and fortune. So upsetting.
Prescient is such a great word, Graham, because we are in the playbook, and it's I mean maybe it's like 2 books ago for us. I mean it's very recent. But we are like waking up this morning to new news of new orders. It's like, oh my gosh, we have seen this before. I, of course, too, really loved Shapiro's sort of lengthy, deep dive into what I have always referred to as the Orson Welles Voodoo Macbeth. That was very illuminating for me, especially given that you both certainly know, and by now people at home probably know that, I'm real big into like critical race theory and the relationship of Black theater makers and Shakespeare. And Shapiro really unpacked that in a way that, even though it had been mentioned in undergrad, nobody really took that time that Shapiro takes in this book. So that's been really great. Wherever I shout out James Shapiro, though, I must shout out Dr. Ayanna Thompson. And we did read her book, Blackface, which also is about like race in the early modern period, and Shakespeare as a vehicle for that, but also some of the other early modern plays and how that shows up for us still in contemporary theater practice and film practice. Roberta, I'm going to put you on the spot ever so quickly. Gentle, it's gentle. It's gentle. We also read the novel Hamnet, so not everything we've read some fiction.
That's right. I thank you. That's one of my favorites.
Well, and you and the great cultural critic Jordan Williams got to see the stage play, which I did not, because I was not in London that summer. Graham was not in London that summer. Can you tell us a little bit about the play that was adapted from this book?
Yeah. So lots of
on the spot. I put you on the spot.
Is it worth also just saying what the book is too?
Yeah. Well, so Hamnet is a fictional retelling of essentially how, Shakespeare and his wife, Anne Hathaway, got together, their life, their children, how that, how when he was away at work and what happened when death happened in the family, all that. So it's like a fictional life story, but really focused on Anne. Um, and there's magic, it really leans into her connection to the earth. She, her her spirituality, her, there, I think what's really great about what attracted me to that book for sure is just that perspective of who is this enigmatic character that is causes so much controversy, I think, in history. So it was really cool to have that, and then to see the adaptation. Um, and we thought at the end of our Europe adventure, and it was one of those things where it's like I mean I was hyped. I was so excited to see this play. And there were things that I really, really loved, and then there were things that I felt were such a disappointment. And I think there's a movie coming out soon. And I think that what's interesting is the casting of the play production versus what is been announced in the movie is so wildly different. Because it was the book was adapted. Uh, Now I can't remember her name, but I think she's Indian, East Indian for I think, and she I don't know who decided in the casting, whatever, but they cast a black woman in the role of Anne, and what I loved her. I thought she was, oh my God, she was spectacular. She was powerful. She was in her body. She was connected. And what really let me down, I think, was that the world of the play was bland. It was bleak. It was brown, neutral tones. And when I saw the world through her eyes in the novel, it was bright. It was colorful. It was full of the trees and the woods and the grass and the hawks and the birds, and her connection the magic in the earth was so strong that I thought it was such a missed kind of visual opportunity in the production. But I thought the acting was freaking phenomenal. Oh, so the talent was stellar. What a great, acting company. And I think it's just, yeah, I just remember having such a great time. But I did feel like when we left, I remember Jordan and I being like, huh, that didn't quite, it missed the mark somewhere. So I'm curious what the movie adaptation is going to be like, because it's
Yeah.
definitely an all white cast, I think, in the movie.
Yeah, I just took a peekaboo, and it's Jessie Buckley as the character is called Agnes in the book
That's right. Thank you.
Instead of Anne
Yes,
Hathaway. So Jessie Buckley plays Agnes, and Paul Mescal plays
that's
Jake.
right. Paul Mescal. Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, the
I don't know.
play is written by Lolita Chakrabarti,
Yes,
who is a British playwright of Indian descent.
thank you.
And she also wrote the play Red Velvet, which is a play about Ira Aldridge, the first American actor, well, the first Black actor on the English stage, on the legit English stage, but he was an American Black. And until pretty recently, she was married to the actor Adrian Lester, who is among one of my favorite British
Ooh.
Shakespearean actors. So I was very covetous that you and Jordan got to see
Yeah,
that play.
her adaptation was, I thought, really smart. Um, I I feel like the production could have been a bit more creative, more less realistic. I felt like it really leaned into realism in the production, and I don't know that for me the book really calls for that. So
Mhm. Well, Graham, I will. This is like it's totally on topic, but it's separate from book club. But I'll let you boast also on your recent UK theater going adventures, because I do believe you also got to see a Black American actor on the English stage.
I sure did. I had a great experience. I don't know how the algorithm found me, but Facebook just started like planning my vacation. I just saw this like advertisement for a British Airways flight, nonstop, San Francisco, London, round trip for $450. And I just thought I have this week right before Thanksgiving that I'm doing nothing. And I deserve to go to England for $450.
Don't we
And
all?
it just I'd never been to Stratford-upon-Avon before, and I knew that I was doing this Tempest. There was some research that I wanted to do, and so I booked my flight and showed up in Stratford, which is the most gorgeous little town that is completely the Shakespeare industrial tourism complex, selling every little Shakespeare anything that you could want. Every store is like, if music be the food of love, buy our baked goods, you know, like it is wonderful. It's a wonderful place. And it was really like, you know, right before the week before Thanksgiving, November, it was really like the whatever the end of the shoulder season is, almost like the no season. So there's only one thing still playing, which was an Othello, where John Douglas Thompson was playing Othello, and he's just about my favorite Shakespearean actor living on the planet, and got to see his work in that show, which was magnificent. Got to hang out with him for a bit afterwards, which was wonderful. Um, and got to like stroll around Stratford, and it snowed the first morning that I was there, so it was just like idyllic in this fairy tale way, and had a great time doing, you know, there's three terrific museums. If folks have never been to Stratford, you know, obviously the Birthplace Trust is a good place to start. Anne Hathaway's cottage for me is like even better because it's this enormous, you know, house that you have to kind of take a long walk to get to, and not as crowded as Shakespeare's house and Shakespeare's birthplace. And then the schoolroom, which is a kind of run by a different organization, was maybe one of my favorite experiences, because the room where a lot of the kids in Stratford were educated around the time that Shakespeare was a kid. Is still exists in what was the Guild Hall. That's where they went to school, and there's a series of terrific exhibits there, and and a schoolmaster. There's an actor who plays the role of the schoolmaster who is like in character throughout, and who really kind of helps you understand a pedagogy that was, you know, the pedagogy of the day, and a very different way to teach um, thinking and growth and development and interrogation and rhetoric. And so I just had a terrific time for very little money over in England, seeing that work.
I want to
Ah,
go back.
me too. Me too. I love JDT too. Though the last stage thing I saw him in was he played Hamlet at ACT, American Conservatory Theater here in San Francisco, directed by Carrie Perloff. Sort of one of her sort of last shows before she moved on. Uh, and First of all, I was shocked that JDT was even in San Francisco, because I had only ever seen him on the East Coast. So I was like, "Oh, grace us with your presence." Um, and there he was playing Hamlet, and that was pretty incredible, just to like sit at the feet of JDT. Is like, oh, even if I personally thought, hmm, that's a choice. It's a little old for Hamlet. That's a choice.
How old was Ian McKellen recently playing Hamlet? You know, like 80-year-old Ian McKellen?
Look, it's a memory play.
Yes.
Not to get us too off course, but that's what the Juliet book talks about. These men are allowed to play these roles despite age, and they are like revered for it, whereas it is not the same for women who are playing roles. You cannot be older and playing Juliet. Sorry.
I too have read the Sophie Duncan book, Juliet, which has a different UK title, and so I am excited to really get into it on an episode because I think it's a remarkable book. I would love to just a gentle pivot because I know, Roberta, you have just done this deep cut for a group of high school students. So tell us about your work in cutting the Macbeth.
Yeah. When I was cutting this play, I was reflecting. I think Macbeth is the play that I have seen the most in production without actually meaning to. It's not like I've never claimed it as my favorite, but I've somehow seen it the most. I saw it at RSC when I was there with Jordan. So um they just did it at OSF last season. So I feel I've seen it so much. So what was great going into that cut is I felt very familiar with the play. I've read it, several times, seen it several times. So I cut this play for my friend Lauren, who's a high school drama teacher. And she wanted to try Shakespeare with her students. And she wasn't confident in cutting the play. And so I was like, well, I could do that for you. I do it for me all the time. And so it was really interesting to cut a play for somebody else because I had never done that before. And normally when I'm working on a production that is my production, then I'm cutting the script and I'm visualizing how I would play out the moments or how I would make this cut from this moment to this moment make sense. So it's a great exercise. And I cut a lot because Lauren gave me a stipulation. It had to be 60 to 70 minutes max. And her students have never done a Shakespeare. So she was just nervous that all of that language would scare them off, that they wouldn't be able to handle the memorizing, et cetera, et cetera. So I I feel actually really good about that cut. I don't know that the purists would, but I went into it thinking, what are the things that, like, what are the important themes? What are the things that the students are going to resonate with? What's going to really attract them? This language might be the thing that people associate this play with, but does it serve the moment? Like, I really had to think about in each scene, just because I know people love, this chunk of text or whatever, this scene, is that actually serving what the students need? So it made me think about Shakespeare in a completely different way, which was nice. And I got to kind of still keep the academic in me, but also kind of throw it away in hopes of making an adaptation that would be fun and exciting and not too scary.
Did you cut the porter?
I mostly did, yeah. So I
Red's
did.
face.
But actually, I wanted to cut the whole thing, but of course, that moment leads into what's his bucket coming in to the Macbeth house, Macduff. So we had to get him here so that we can find out that the king is dead. So of course we had the porter, at least open the door for him, but the whole porter bit was cut. Ironically, that's one of Lauren's favorite parts, but I was like, girl, they're not going to be able to do that. And I think, and that was one of the hard things too with the RSC production, watching it. They really spent a lot of time rewriting that whole porter scene so that it was this kind of fresh comedy, because Shakespeare had written it for a specific actor for a comedic bit, and so they kind of took that same approach and reworked it for that production. I still thought it's too much. It's too long. It's too long. There's too many knock knocks. Okay.
It's the original knock knock joke.
It's so many. And if your production isn't making some sort of sense that resonates for you guys, and like, even so, like, does that come, like, do we get that in the audience? Like, I think it's a, I think it's a challenge in the play that could be exciting to tackle, but that wasn't one of the priorities for that adaptation.
Graham, where are you at with your script work for The Tempest?
Um, I am in the middle of a cut right now. I'm trying to figure out the cut and thinking also about kind of how to realize the magic in the play. One of the things that I really want to lean into after doing a bunch of research on tempests at Stratford is that, it seems like there are often like a few different kinds of Prosperos. There's like the colonialist Prospero, there's the kind of bumbling librarian bookworm Prospero. But there hasn't, and there's a tyrant Prospero, but there hasn't in a long time that I've seen or heard of really been a sorcerer Prospero that
Mm.
makes sense to me. And so I really want to lean into like what is the magic of the world? How does the magic of the world operate? So I'm reading a lot of research about John Dee, Queen Elizabeth's astrologer and magician, and looking at kind of how the magic will manifest in the world of the play and how to do the mask, which is this
Mm.
big kind of supernatural event that happens, around the wedding of or the betrothal of Ferdinand and Miranda near the end of the play. And so it'll be dark at the amphitheater at Marin Shakes, where we'll be doing The Tempest by Act Two when that happens. And I'm talking to an amazing puppet designer about realizing these supernatural forms. So I'm really excited about where it's headed.
I love
I'm
that.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it. I'm super pumped to see your production. And Roberta, will Lauren's high school students be
Mm.
doing this for public performance or just classroom?
Yes,
There will be public
there will
performance.
be 2 or 3 public performances. It's a cast of 10, I think. Yeah, 2 or 3.
Okay, great. Great.
And
Um,
I'll of course see it.
of
Gotta
course you
support.
will
Gotta
see it. I
support.
I mean, you went and did a workshop. You went and did a workshop with the students too, right? In the class.
Yeah, and that was really helpful because I got to meet them and see, like, where they're at with the language, and how much we could push them. And so meeting them and working with them even for a couple hours was really helpful for me in my process, because it was really a math problem. This cut was a math problem. It was, I have to keep it under this many actors. I can't give each actor too many roles to play, because Lauren said that it wouldn't work for her group, that they would fall apart. And so she had things that she knew would and wouldn't work, and then I had to somehow math it all together in that cut. So yeah.
Well, that's super exciting. Um, as we wrap up here, I'm going to state again that you're coming back in 4 to 6 weeks. We're going to have you back on the show. There's so many. We didn't get to our Emma Smith book. We didn't talk about any of the Marjorie Garber books that we attempted and failed. So we still have so much
I'm
ground to
not giving hope
cover.
up.
I want to stay in the loop on what's going on with Graham's show. So we will have you back on. But just tell the viewers at home what we're reading right now.
Oh, how Sondheim can change your life. Honestly, can't remember the author's name though. Um, sorry about that.
Yes, we are reading How Sondheim Can Save Your Life. We are about halfway through the book as of this
Mhm.
recording, and it is our second Sondheim book. So people should know that we also have covered a lot of books on the American musical, because we also love American musicals. And again, we've done fiction and memoirs, so we have an extensive list, and I'll be sure to drop it down below.
The author's name is Richard Scotch.
Richard
Thank you.
Scotch, How Sondheim Can Change Your Life. The first chapter is on Gypsy.
And
So
Sean Taylor Corbett reads the
I was going to say,
audiobook. Shout
I
out to
felt really
Sean.
bad because I didn't remember the author, but I remembered Sean Taylor Corbett is the narrator of the book. So for me, I guess that's what hit.
Our good pal, Sean. Well, Roberta, Graham, thank you so much for giving me some time this afternoon. I will be in your Google Calendars to schedule our next Kiki for
I've always wanted to be a season regular. I did it.
I'll try not to be so nervous next time.
Oh my goodness. You were fine. You're fine. We have many more books and stories to cover. So thank you both so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
3, 2, 1. Let's go.